We are Squawking Dead, a podcast pulverizing episodes beyond the Walking Dead universe. Sometimes we give you news, sometimes we make you laugh, sometimes, but most times we go deep. I'm your host, David Cavio, and I'm joined by Cosmo Zero and I, Rachel Burt, Sharon D, aka Blazy Gardner, and Bridget, ko-fi.com/Punky Brewster. That's PUNKYBRUISETER. In the chat, we have Francisco, and we're here to talk about The Boys' 6th episode of its 4th season titled Dirty Business. I think our reaction to it is a little bit more hilarious than, for me at least, than the actual episode. There are funny things in this episode. Holy mackerel.
The funniest part of this entire episode was Ashley. It's not just because I'm a Colby stan. Her
I was
outfit,
not laughing, but yes, sure.
the stuff that she was saying to Huey was cracking me up.
Oh, the pink butthole up to my wrists imagery until you poop. The sitting on the cake and the farting?
The pout that she made when he's like, I have a surprise for you, and it's not scat. And she's like,
It's not scat.
I mean, it definitely beats the paella line. Let's talk about Ashley, though, a little bit further because, okay, obviously Ashley's taken on the comedic role in this episode, getting more involved. She's just inserting herself here and there in this drama that's unfolding. That's absolutely hilarious. I'm kind of glad that she's a little bit more on the comic relief side because things are getting a little serious and out of control with the detention centers. We will not be slaves to the woke transgender or whatever Homelander says. That is a buzz talking point on VNN. So we've been talking a big game about her taking V and going crazy, maybe being the hero. That was me. I'm sorry. Is this the right atmosphere for Ashley, just being in this comedic zone?
I love every minute that Colby's on screen. So as long as she's getting scenes, I will take it.
I'm 100% with you on that, Rachel. And I like when Sage was like, what are you doing here? And she had the balls to be like, Tek-Cave invited me. What are you going to do about it?
I thought you knew everything.
That's the Ashley I like.
Thinking her way into everything or out of everything.
Maybe she's getting a little more confidence. But now that Tek-Cave is dead, will that change her confidence level? Because she doesn't have
That's a great
the
question.
money guy behind her.
Well, it's just one more guy, but I don't think this changes anything for her.
This is like the second Coleman died. She was like involved with him. Now Tek-Cave.
Scratch.
Yeah, all these dudes that are involved with Ashley are just like getting taken out left and right.
I think next is Black Noir.
She'll probably be heading back over to, what's his name?
Adam, is that her superpower? Killing
She's a Black
the
Widow.
the guys she gets involved with end up dead.
Oh, she's also a web weaver, just a different kind.
Ooh, yeah.
I also have to say really, really quickly how much I loved her blazer dress because it's so fitting for Ashley. She's always in a stylish blazer, but this is a fancy event. So they had to turn that blazer into a dress and I freaking loved it.
So wait, you're hitting on something that we didn't really notice because incrementally, she started out with the kind of a cookie cutter businessy suit, pantsuit-ish situation, but gradually over time they kept upgrading her.
They were always stylish.
It was always stylish, but it wasn't out there. She wasn't drawing attention to herself.
They were pretty brightly colored early on.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as we hit this season, the first thing I noticed, and it's something I didn't really want to comment on, the dresses are more plungy. The one where she was wearing the strappy things over the boobs. And I mean, it's the only way I could describe it without getting into fashion. Her fashion choices are far more bold this season, which goes to her character this season. She's taking far more bold chances.
I guess she figures I'm going to die anyway, so I might as well just put it out there.
On the flip side, there is something to be said about her now being pushed out, wanting to be noticed too, to not be neglected or overlooked.
Or she actually took V and she has this whole new confidence set that she didn't have before. And she's just hiding it because we have instances of people hiding their Venus, right? That sounded wrong.
So what we said about Ashley, or rather Colby, and all those lines, putting herself physically into the scene now a little bit more with some of the things she did, like smearing the juices on Huey's face. And in terms of acting, it pairs very well with the guy yelling in a Manhattan street, probably. Maybe it's Toronto. Who knows? Abortion is murder. So just imagine it. You're an actor. And you have to put yourself out there and you have to say this thing very loudly where people on the street can hear you. I'm just trying to put you in the mind of an actor who has to do it, who has to go for it. And he says it twice. I have so much respect for actors when they can just do that and then just be able to go at home and say, paycheck. This was worth it.
I'm always thinking about how the actors are dealing with the scenes that they have to film. No matter how funny or gross or awkward,
Despicable.
especially the awkward scenes, I'm always like, ooh, they really had to do this. Ooh.
Kind of pairs with also the scene with Black Noir and the Deep, and how the setup is Noir wants to leave. He can actually fly, all that fun little information. But really the scene is to kind of drill down on the Deep turning a dark corner. He's saying the only way to really move forward with himself and for people to take him seriously is violence. Violence is the answer. So I don't know. Are we going to derive much more satisfaction from the Deep's antics at this point?
I guess we'll have to wait and see.
When you see Butcher and Joe with Samir, in the background there is a sign that says Vought Family Farms. And in the scene with Deep and Noir, Deep references Vought Family Farms pushing out all the people in Indonesia to expand their palm oil farms, which is a big deal right now. Forest areas being destroyed for palm oil, and it's like taking out the habitat of orangutans and stuff like that. Did you also see the Black Noir anti-union poster behind him?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. There was also the
Time
Crimson
theft.
Countess. Do you want to know what it says? Don't be a time thief. Crimson Countess is watching. If you aren't working, you are stealing time from Vought American. This includes goofing off, making personal calls, and time card fraud. If you're found guilty of time theft, you will be terminated immediately. And what's even funnier is next to it, because, of course, is an alcoholism partnership support group flyer. Because to deal with the constant scrutiny, you need alcoholism support.
Time theft is a real thing.
Yeah, of course it is. But it's just the fact
It's
that
like so facetious, but I don't understand because it's like, that is real.
it is real, but then it's the threat of soups too, and you'll be terminated immediately.
I mean, that part is weird, but if superheroes existed, they would be utilized by capitalism if possible. So,
Right.
Is there a
right.
reason that we're seeing so much of the Crimson Countess? I feel like every episode there's like 5 pictures, mentions, references. She is still everywhere.
I don't know, because Soldier Boy killed her in season 3.
Oh, exploded her
He
to death.
exploded
Yeah.
her.
He nuked her to death.
He exploded her to death.
I mean, you'd have to. Crimson is pretty strong, I guess. Anyway, Francisco was saying the actor who plays Firecracker is a lot like Stormfront. Aya Cash is Jewish, and she played a Nazi, alt-right reactionary person. It's clever casting because you want to see what the actors feel about these characters' ideologies, etc. Yeah, makes sense.
I know it's odd, but I did have a thought this week, and I shared it with Dave. When we were talking about Homelander down in the basement lab, why didn't we make the correlation of him being burned in the oven and being a Nazi?
It is kind of odd, too, because in one sense, they're making him the Great White Hope. In the other sense, he's being burned in an oven like they would in the Holocaust. So it's true. I don't know what to make of that, but I think there is something to that. I want to turn my focus to MM for a hot sec. Marvin/Mother's Milk. I've been starting to think that, kind of like you guys had mentioned this subtly, that some people's powers don't really manifest quite the same way. And I actually wonder, because Francisco in our Discord had mentioned that the reason why he's called Mother's Milk is because his mom was a soup. Now, I don't know if there was a mention of this in the show.
Oh, I don't
Francisco
remember
will
that.
correct me on this.
There wasn't.
This pairs well with what Sage says about Janine. I'm wondering if MM might have at least compound V in him as a natural soup. I mean, the hives are still there. He's doing his best to control himself. Do you think maybe this is how his powers manifest at some point? I'm not sure. And I was just thinking it would make a good plot point to maybe stop Butcher should he decide to want to genocide everybody. We don't know what his decision is, but it's just one more brick that would stand in his way of killing all soups, essentially.
It wasn't mentioned in the show, so I haven't felt like it was anything that was going to come up.
This is the first time hearing that MM's mom was a soup, so that thought definitely never crossed my mind. The hives, I feel like, are just a way to show how insanely stressed out he is.
Mm-hmm.
And how on a personal level, none of this is good for him. And Francisco says, nope, no mention. MM only said once his mom called him MM to Huey in S1, but they never explained it. Though in the comics, they went into a backstory about why he's called MM, which maybe we'll get at some point.
I actually kind of thought that might be what they're doing and why he's so anti-soup, but now that you're saying that no, they don't mention it in the show at all, that's something they would have brought up at the beginning and not wait till the 4th season to bring it up. So I don't think that's going to be an issue.
just to go a tad further, we always attributed MM's OCD and his constant need for control or control over his team or whatever to just a quirk or behavior. But if he did have powers, and we keep talking about absolute power corrupts absolutely, and how if he did have powers, and this was something he kept very secret to himself and only himself, I could see a world in which the constant vigilance it takes to suppress his power, whatever it is, the OCD is an expression of that. Just constantly needing to control his anger, his rage, his powers.
You know, Dave, you might be right, because Sage even says you passed on your OCD to her and you've messed her up, passed along your problem. So maybe he does manifest his power that way. How did Sage know all that stuff anyway?
She's probably
Maybe
monitoring
she doesn't.
him.
She doesn't recognize it as a superpower or anything like that. She just thinks it's OCD.
That's the only reason why I went down this path, is because she says what we were all seeing, is that she's got the same OCD as you, same impulse control issues.
I think that's ridiculous to bring this up as a story point and have them blame him for that. Mental illness is hereditary in a lot of situations. And so just get the girl a therapist. Like, it's not his fault. You can't do that. You know what I mean? That would be like blaming my father or my grandmother for like my mental illness. Did I get it from them? Sure. Hereditarily, yes, that's where it came from. It doesn't present in everybody. So like my brother has the same genetics, but he doesn't have half of the struggle I do. You know what I mean? It's not intentional.
And it wasn't a choice. Exactly.
Right.
They didn't choose to pass this on.
That bothers me as like a story point. That's dumb.
She's saying that to needle him. I don't think they
Oh,
were
yeah, of course.
bringing that in as a story point. I don't think anybody believes that, really. She was saying that to get under his skin and to make him.
And it worked.
Right, it did. And gave her a little bit of relief for a while. A really bad timing for Homelander.
And we got to see stupid Sage stuffing her face with German chocolate cake.
When Homelander wanted to take over as CEO, and they were like asking him all these questions about, well, what are we going to do about marketing this? And what are we going to do about that? Well, then they just did the same thing here, where he's like, we're going to make a soup army. And they're like, but what are you going to do about this? And he's like,
The Justice Department, OPEC. You know, what are we going to do about our economy?
He's not actually that smart. In terms of like business, he's got a one-track mind. He's sold on this one idea, but he's like, I don't care about any of the other stuff.
Well, doesn't that go to many people and their desires?
Well, yeah, but I'm saying like you can't navigate corporate America. That's what he's trying to do, because that's how he does everything else. He just steamrolls over people because he can.
Right.
He can't in this situation because he needs to sell them on something. And he's not good at it.
He's like a lot of people who come up with that golden idea but don't know how to get there. The classic, I have this idea for an app, and then you go into the idea and it's like, okay, how do we get there? Who's going to do it? No, I gave you the idea so that you could do it. Yeah. But it also goes to another thing too. There are a lot of people out there with ideas or thoughts about what they want to be, but don't put in the work to do it too. We sort of talked about this in our Game of Thrones coverage. When it came to Aegon, he wasn't groomed to be heir to the throne. So when he was finally placed on it, you get a whole lot of winging it, relying on Otto Hightower, but then you have the additional factor, which is imposter syndrome. And I think that's what's happening with Homelander here. He was groomed to be a certain thing, but he's trying out another thing. And he wasn't groomed to be that thing, to be the person that leads the New World Order. You either have to appoint people that you trust in this world that is very untrustworthy, full of people who have powers that are uncontrollable. So what are you even doing, essentially? And so Vicky Newman comes in and basically saves the day. She knows how governments and corporations, the economy works.
Well, even she stumbles through it too, because it's all
but at least she can fake it enough to make it for the most part, but has a general sense of the balance that's necessary in terms of how to maintain economies. She probably knows the system of government backwards and forwards, how the Justice Department works, etc. I'd probably wager that. And she has her father as an example of how to deal with corporate America. She knows those inner workings as well. But again, Homelander, imposter syndrome. I don't think we've seen that completely manifest yet, but we start seeing it in his face even as Victoria Newman is explaining or trying to save his butt, essentially. He has this look on his face like he's angry and frustrated that he can't do it himself.
Yeah.
Like he said at the start, I'm going to do it myself. F it. He just can't. And then what happens at the end of this episode? He's sucking on Firecracker's teat. which is like bringing that whole chestnut back in.
His inadequacies, which is ridiculous because he just went and took care of all those people because he was trying to burn his connections to humanity. So he didn't feel inadequate anymore, but it's so ingrained in him.
Well, it didn't work because sometimes doing what you think you need isn't what you need. He thought it was going to make him feel better,
But it's a lot of work.
when she squirted him in the face, the
It's
look
not
on
something
his
he
face,
expected.
just the utter, oh my, I can't
What'd you say,
believe this.
utter?
Like, this is my dream.
Anyway, it's something he didn't quite expect. And at the same time, we'd started saying that his humanity was his kryptonite. And maybe that's true-ish, but it's like Sharon D always says, what's up with psychopaths and milk? What is up with that? The breast milk is his weakness. Now I'm thinking, was he ever breastfed as a kid?
No, he wouldn't have been.
Right? That's too much of a gamble, baby. He just can't risk it.
That's why it's such a psycho thing for him now, because he never had it. And he equates that with having a mother and love, which he also never had. So he manifests it now in the only way he can, which I guess first mother figure was Madeline.
Right. Who's
And
pregnant.
as we see, he still has her milk bottles.
From when A-Train was rifling for the Compound V for Huey's dad, really.
He manifests his need for a mother in the only way he can, which is the milk.
It is kind of funny that we transitioned from Mother's Milk, Marvin Milk, to Homelander getting Mother's Milk, technically, with Firecracker. What is his mother's powers, Francisco?
Well, they mentioned Homelander's mom. He walked out of her. She was like a nobody.
Yeah, she was a drug-addicted runaway. So Francis says, in the show, they mentioned his dad, which had a story with Vought. It changed differently than in the comics, but it was the same basis where his dad wanted to sue Vought, though MM's mom called him MM because some powers she had since she was young. Okay. I don't think they'll explain it, to be honest. The whole milk gimmick is on Homelander now. Anyone could become president if they BS everyone. I was legit not expecting that firecracker scene. Ah ha 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 ha. It's funnier if you say it like that.
It's
That's what I've learned
so
in
weird.
acting school. So for all of Amazon Prime's promos and so many people posting skins of Webweaver in the Spider-Man games, by the way, in case you wanted to know, like mod skins, you can skin the Spider-Man character in Webweaver's costume. It was unavoidable. It's what I kept seeing on my feed. They kept showing Webweaver next to Spider-Man, like in these panel images and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden you get to see this character. And it is kind of one of those things that you expect, but also don't expect from the boys. You think he's going to be some cool character, and he's not. His thing that he needed, that he was addicted to, was roofies, Rohypnol.
Was it? I thought just put it in there to knock him out. I didn't get the impression that that's what he was.
They said it in like a throwaway line. They went and got information from Webweaver, and they shot heroin up his butt.
His buttocks. Okay. And it ends up being
right.
Rohypnol.
And then,
okay, gotcha.
But what he did was he gave him Rohypnol instead to knock him out.
Right. So they could take the suit, the smelly, smelly suit.
It was so unavoidable to see the webs everywhere. And given that what those webs are supposed to represent where Webweaver is concerned, I can imagine that room was probably super rank. I probably would not have been able to go in it.
Everything about it just sounds awful.
I like that Webweaver is more anatomically correct where a spider is concerned as to where the web exits their body.
I agree.
Yeah.
Right. So he actually has a spinneret. Did you see the little claws on it?
The little teeth or
spinnerets?
whatever?
Yeah. I mean, that's what they use to do the web designs and stuff. So they did a drug test of several years ago where they gave spiders LSD, cocaine, marijuana, I think meth was the other one. And they looked at the webs that the spiders made. The one where they were on heroin or cocaine was like just crazy spider webs everywhere. So I'm thinking like the drugs he's taking is affecting his ability to weave a web. He can't make a proper web. It's just all over the place.
He's just farting glue everywhere, essentially.
When they all showed up at the mansion, the shot right before they showed the outside of the mansion, they showed icicles hanging from the gargoyle. And I'm thinking that was a preview of what was to come. Pun intended.
Oh no, be specific.
There are many fluids.
I remembered now, finally, what made me turn into a conservative. Walk with me here. Because we're taking notes on the episode and we're pausing as the shots quickly cut between different areas of Tek-Knight's Tek-Cave. The dildos were fine and the gimp masks didn't bother me too much. The rack, the stocks, Didn't bother me really that much. Ladio was the name of the guy who was hung up, the former sidekick who lied.
Bring out
I don't
the
know what
guilt.
about. Don't care. But here's the thing that turned me to a conservative. It was, paid attention, God help you, the urinal had a little hose at the bottom. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. That snaked down to a mask on the wall.
I saw that.
And the urinal was gross and unkempt and dirty. And that's what turned my stomach.
It wasn't Ashley saying, I'm going to rub my C all over your face and pee on you like a skunk. Like,
No. And I'll tell you why. Just like Firecracker getting the milk straight from the udders, don't mind that so much. But when you actually see the grossness on the wall and it connecting to a mask, and then the pee fills up the mask, I'm sure that's when it gets real. Because somebody's saying something you can throw over your shoulder, and it's funny.
I think my favorite part, though, in all honesty, was Newman fantasizing about popping her own head when she had to listen to that white guy talk.
That's pretty funny.
Which was a real thing somebody said in real life.
I feel like that 5 times a day.
That just sums up all women everywhere.
Then I got a little bit worried for her because I'm like, if you think that too hard, might it happen? Might. She could do that to herself. Careful, girl.
You know what's really funny that you mentioned? Because there are a couple other tie-ins that we should mention. And that's sort of one of them because as Tek-Knight's leading quote unquote web weaver to his Tek-Cave, he mentions the Safdie brothers who are Sephardic Jews like me and who were directors, creators of Uncut Gems, starring Adam Sandler. So there's that. The one other bigger connection that isn't an aside, Tek-Knight's family, the Vernon family, comes from generational wealth. And that whole conversation, as if I wasn't grossed out enough, that whole conversation about how they got their generational wealth by slave catching. And they would have even caught you, A-Train. But in turn, he invested in correctional facilities, right?
Private prison.
Exactly. And that's where Frenchie's being held in the beginning of the episode. Vernon LLC, Vernon Correctional Facility. So it's a good tie-in with all its quirks. This episode does a really good job of being self-referential within itself. At least there's continuity in all the smut and disgusting conservative talking points.
I like that A-Train is finally really, really, really turning. He is so disgusted with what he's having to swallow, again, no pun intended, from these rich white guys that are telling him that their ancestors would have caught his ancestors for money. Like,
they would have had a hard time catching you.
I'm not even an African American, and I'm like cringing my butt off. How tone deaf are you to be saying this to A-Train?
It's basically knowing that nobody can stop him. That's it. He's in the company of right people, essentially.
He has money, so he can do whatever he wants.
And what is A-Train going to do? He knows that he's under everybody's thumb. What are you going to do? You're going to bite the hand that feeds you, run over it, chop its arms off by moving really fast?
The little scene where he's dropping off Mother's milk and the little boy sees him. And the little boy has that look. And you can just see A-Train like, oh man, this little kid, he doesn't believe in me. He thinks I've done something wrong. And then the little kid smiles at him. You just see the change come over him. He smiles back. And I was like, man, that made me feel so good. A-Train is going to side with the girls. Minorities unite.
The girls?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Annie?
Oh, okay. It's the boys, guys. The patriarchy always wins.
Sage putting out her raison d'etre, right?
Raison d'etre. That actually was frightening.
Right. She's like, F them all.
Slit their throats.
As a woman, I'm totally for that. I mean, I don't really want to slit anybody's throat, but putting my hand in the pockets while getting back at them, I'm all for that. Women have been kept down long enough by the patriarchy. I'm not talking about you, Dave. You're nice.
But everybody else.
I live in America, so I've had a lot of opportunities, I think. I'm not going to get into that. But I want to mention something about the party in particular. I don't know if it got noticed by anyone else, but Vicky and Sage are talking about women not being listened to, right? Sure. And we've all had moments like that in our lives, truly. When I say I've had lots of opportunity, I just mean like women in America are not oppressed like women are elsewhere. We've all had people gaslight us and stuff in our lives, but they're talking about how no one listens to women. And yet they're with Homelander and Firecracker comes over and she wants to be a part of the conversation. The women are the first ones to shut her down.
And that's real.
That is real life. Sage is like, this is a private conversation.
Ashley coming to the party too. Sage gets in a jab.
They were the first ones to shut her down. When this is presented, I think you can watch this and be like, oh, okay, I get it. Conservatives are evil and liberals are the good guys. That's the whole point of it or whatever. But it's facetious, it's tongue in cheek because actually No one cares about you, especially in politics. No one cares about you, little people. This is all about the big guns. This is about the
Say
people
it
with
right.
powers. This is about the people with money. And anybody who's watching this outside of America, just know those people don't care about the American public either. It has nothing to do with that. That part of this is bothering me because it's really heavy-handed. And I'm like, dude, nobody cares about the little people. Nobody does. Get out of here.
The small folk. I was
It's the
getting ready to
small
say
folk.
it's like Aegon and the small
You
folk.
saw it. I thought you were going to
It's
say
the
it.
small
There's
folk.
just no entry point.
That's the small folk. Yeah. I came on and I was like, I don't know that I like this show right now. Frenchie's not on it, which is a big point of me not liking it.
We all said that. An episode without Frenchie, it's like, what are we watching? We're not watching The Boys.
You miss Frenchie. Oh, girls really do get it done.
I just miss him. I just miss him.
Even Butcher makes reference. He's like, I got this from a
Frenchman.
Frenchman friend of
French
mine.
guy.
To make up for the fact that he wasn't there. He's still there. Huh?
No, we want him there. He needs to be there. Talking about him isn't enough.
It's true.
I felt like Kimiko this episode. I have no place to go.
Oh,
Frenchie's not here.
That was so sad. Also, there is a part of me that's like, is he denying the visitor? He's in a private prison run by Tek-Knight's business.
Family business.
Is he denying a visitor or is it out of his control?
I feel like he is.
I feel like he is denying her. And I say that because of the comment he made. I'm afraid she'll be mad, but even more so, I'm afraid she won't be.
I'm afraid she'll be okay with it.
Yeah, like no matter how she reacts to this, it's going to mess with him more. And he knows that. So I do honestly feel like he's rejecting her visitation.
And Bridget, you said it best. It's not about absolution or atonement or whatever. It's about punishment. He wants to feel the punishment, the weight.
Oh, so we have two different versions of wanting to feel the punishment in this episode.
This better not be him leaving the show. I'm going to have a real big problem with this.
Doubt that. This is just trying to put a point on how much he's feeling alone and withdrawing at the moment. I'm pretty sure he'll be back.
Well, I think with the Vernon correctional facilities being the proposed internment camps, I think some of that's going to come into play if they start actually rounding up people and putting them into temporary holding.
Him being in there is going to give us an inside perspective too.
Exactly.
True. They have to see that point of view. I want to mention what Francisco said because he commented, Joe Kessler says, we need someone like you, Billy, before the soups start rounding us up and dump us in camps, end quote. It's like he knew what Homelander's plans were going to be before it was confirmed to us, which is kind of an interesting point because it's like Dave always says, it's the spooky beta.
I was thinking that also, but honestly, there's no way he could have known that at all. But it's kind of like how I regard the boys in the first place. How are you people still alive?
Truly.
Pure luck.
Yep.
I mean, if not for the fact that soups are incredibly flawed, but that also increases the danger quotient too. It's just that, well, if they are in a bad mood, you're done. The fact that he knew it is almost like comedy into itself, or that he stumbled upon it or had the same thought.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know that it's a matter of him knowing. He knows Homelander well enough to think this is something he would do. So if it comes to this, I wouldn't be surprised. Not that he knows what was going to happen, but like, oh yeah, careful or else this is next. And well, yeah, here we are, because that's just the kind of thing Homelander is.
Talk about Tek-Knight, the relationship between Batman and the Joker, how it's often referred to as like this weird double-sided coin. The other knows what the other is thinking, how they think, what they think, and that none of them can live or be in the world or exist or have purpose without the other, in a sense. And does that accurately describe Butcher and
Homelander?
Sure,
yeah,
they give each other
yes.
purpose, although in that relationship, it's often considered that the Joker is more romantic towards Batman than anything else. He's in love with him. That's the argument a lot of people make that have like really read the comics a lot.
I could see Butcher being in love with Homelander.
So Francisco also says, I felt this episode A-Train starting to run off the tracks, like his second movie.
Man, look at us all with the puns today.
Well, no, that's the name of his second movie, so technically he's on brand. I felt in this episode A-Train starting to run off the tracks and close to die because he already knows his leak is exposed. Or I don't know if it's him being the leak.
Well, they know it's not Coleman.
But at the same time, Firecracker does cast suspicion on Sage. Simultaneously. So that muddles the chances of him being caught.
She's been wronged by Sage, and so she's like, well, she feels like she's
I'm just talking in
Sage.
terms of A-Train, though. Because she does that, A-Train is still kind of safe, because now Homelander's thinking, oh, is Sage just super smart and trying to F me?
Because nobody's purpose is actually to catch the person who's really doing it. It's to get themselves in a position that benefits them the most.
Oh, which we talked about in the last
That's all
episode.
it is. Yeah, that's
which
all
was
it is.
Laris trying to get Aegon to stay, but also at the same time to cast suspicion on Alicent and Aemond. Wow, names. But it's interesting to see what you're willing to say to benefit yourself, or considering the path that you're taking and who gets ruined in the process. By doing that, she ingratiates herself to Homelander, but at the same time, she's also knocking out a stumbling block in her path towards greatness to give people purpose and meaning and whatnot, to make people the hero of their own story. So I think he's still safe. But to your point, it's kind of like the Walking Dead universe, where anybody who starts to turn a good corner, not like the deep, tends to be on the chopping block. We should talk about Butcher. What I liked about that scene, I haven't really thought about the previous seasons, but this season was also like Fallout, filmed in anamorphic widescreen. So it was very filmic. So when you look at the scene where it comes back to him, the first thing you see is the Vought family farm sign. And not only that, it pans back and cuts to him looking at that sign. Well, it's just before he realizes that Becca and Kessler can see each other and that he's been seeing them. And Kessler's been dead all this time. But he is considering, is this in my son's best interest? Is the pursuit of killing all soups, or the soup that rules them all, will I lose that son as a result of that? Or could he accidentally be taken down in the blowback? And then Becca also says something that is worth talking about. Well, you kill one Homelander, another Homelander, quote unquote, will take his place.
Yes.
Absolutely.
All of those superheroes so far, with the exception really, because maybe even Kimiko has this point to her too, they all at some point have been only focused on self-fulfillment and what matters to them. So it's like taking regular humans who are inevitably awful and giving them superpowers.
Inherently, yeah.
They're going to do what's best for them and their life. That's going to be their focus.
That's what we're all hardwired in our lizard brains to do, is protect yourself first. And you're saying it in terms of moving up the ladder, but it's making sure that you're not the one that gets eaten. You're the one that has the food.
If Homelander's gone, there's a power vacuum. Everybody that we've met so far has been not great.
Right. There's 6 people waiting to jump into that spot immediately. Which, here's the thought. What if it ends up being Black Noir? The one who's not actually a soup ends up being the head of the 7.
Well, he is a soup.
He
can
is
fly.
a soup. He's just not the original Black Noir.
He's just
he has
an
his
actor.
own superpowers.
But he has powers. He can fly. Maybe I should have drilled a little down into that scene with the deep, because he's going to be in Cirque de Vought, the Vivant version of that, which is like that play on Cirque du Soleil, in case people don't know. And so he does acrobatics. He's hyper agile, kind of like Black Noir, which is why they put him in the ninja suit. The Black Ninja. What are those? Anybody ever see a Black Ninja? I hate sake. Anyway, so kind of pairs well with what Homelander says to Tek-Knight. We'll never be partners. Can't even fly. What are you talking about? Because I actually thought about that in terms of the comics too, because Black Noir was supposed to be Homelander under that mask.
What?
Something that we talked about in the Discord, which in the comics, Black Noir was always this clone of Homelander that would be like a backup for Homelander.
That just blew my mind.
The guy who plays Tek-Knight, his name is Derek Wilson. Derek Wilson was also on a about equally disgusting show called Future Man, playing the Bruce Wayne-ish character on The Boys. Mm-hmm. He's a little bit contained, but obviously deranged. But in the show, it's the other way around. He's uncontained. And the little part of him has a little trauma on the inside. He's a gentle soul. He's an artist, if I remember right. He becomes an artist.
I love his voice on that show too. He does a voice.
And also paired with Eliza Coupe.
She was on Scrubs. And she was on Happy Endings.
Happy Endings is a show.
Yeah.
That's a great show.
It is a great show.
Quintessential Eliza Coupe. Zendaya is the safe word for Webweaver. It's a thing he loves most.
It's a Spider-Man reference. She plays Mary Jane in the new Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. Spider-Man loves Mary Jane. That's what he loves most in the world.
It's the things he loves most.
I did not know
that. Was the joke.
Nicely done.
The joke.
Circle is complete. What I want to know from you is, what do you think Butcher decides to do with Samir? Do you think he's going to go ahead with his genocide plan? And Francisco's probably going to have a lot to say about that. But
I don't know that he will, because of how startled he was in that moment. It was enough that Becca was talking to him. He was trying to kind of reconcile that in his head. Like, I'm losing it a little bit, but I have a brain tumor. Like, I'm probably fine. When he finds out that Kessler also is in his head, it's like,
how he finds out.
I'm not he
what
yells at Becca.
Let me tell you the words. Shut your effing cake hole, bitch.
Mm-hmm.
That was, first of all, JDM, congratulations.
He was just
Scary.
Negan in this episode. I'm convinced of it.
Mm-hmm.
I brought it
I
up
don't think he's ever
before.
said, shut your effing cake hole,
But
bitch.
what
has
did he
ever said on The
say?
Walking
He
Dead.
says something earlier in the episode.
He says at the very end, Daddy's home.
That was
which
it.
is something
That
he
was
said
it. I was like, this is just Negan.
in season 8, episode 14. Still got to mean something. That something is a man's word, but he says Daddy's home.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a little nod for the Walking Dead fans. Hello, at the end of the episode. And also the fact that he says, I killed Ezekiel for you. I'm like, okay, now we're fighting JD. Nobody kills Ezekiel, aka Governor Ezekiel of the Commonwealth now today in today terms.
Could we go one step further and even say that Kessler is the tumor?
Correct.
Not just a voice in his head, but the tumor talking to.
Oh, well, he says, I killed Ezekiel for you,
Yes.
right? So
yeah,
he's-
it's the tumor.
Right.
It's
even
the
though I
tumor.
am you.
That's why he says you're going to do this. In my head, I was like, it's because the tumor will control you.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you don't want to do it, you will do what I say that you're going to do.
He does make a concerted effort to say, this is what you want to do, which is the only reason why I'm here. I want to do this because you want to do this. I am you. Outside of that, for myself, I don't know if he's going to go through with it.
I don't think he wants
to say one or the other is really annoying.
I don't think he wants to, but...
Well, he feels like he has to.
No, I don't think that. If the tumor really takes over his body...
He has no choice. Yeah. Maybe. Let's just put it this way. I did notice one small detail that I don't know what it means. And that's when we finally see Becca return. We've seen the scene before where you see the whatever it is that's weaving through his temple / side of his face. That only has appeared when Becca appears. Do I know what it means? No, not when Kessler appears, when Becca appears.
If the tumor is obviously the devil on his shoulder and Becca is the angel on the shoulder, maybe Becca is going to be the thing that cancels out the tumor. And what we're seeing is this thing running away from Becca.
Oh,
we see
that's
it
an
because
interesting
it's
idea.
getting away from her.
So what if there's two things? I had this thought, and I didn't want to say it out loud because it did sound a little silly. I don't think the tumor is Kessler. I think maybe the tumor is a parasite because based on what you're saying, I like this a little bit better than what we've been saying. So what if Kessler was a parasite weaving through his body, like you said, running away from the tumor with the tentacles? There could be two things in his brain because it seems like Kessler is the personification of his desire to rid all soups. And a parasite would want to feed on that desire and grow stronger. And you can see the thing that's on the side of his face is growing bigger. It's not that small, little weavy, little hair-like thing. It's now gotten a little bit bigger.
Longer.
Now, I thought that was Becca because it only shows up when Becca is there. But to your point, it could be the parasite running away from the tumor tentacles that are trying to reach down and get it and go, snip, I got Kessler for you.
The only thing I have going against me in that scenario is that we always see it going up and back into his brain instead of away from where the brain would be.
Oh, so maybe Becca's the parasite.
I don't know.
Worm.
Like I said, I literally had not even given this any thought until you asked the question right in this moment. And this is me just workshopping on the spot.
Exactly.
But like,
we're doing it.
If it has meaning, maybe it has to do with Becca's presence.
Yeah. Whatever that manifests physically in Butcher's body, possibly, I don't know. It is kind of entertaining to see both those sides actually being able to confront one another too. So they've interfaced somehow. But then also what Kessler says about the Panjshir Valley in Afghanistan, north of Kabul. That whole thing, let's be honest, even though he mentions Tanya, his kid, and all that stuff, and boneless wings and whatnot, sports games, that's Butcher, though.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, he doesn't know how to be in the real world unless there's a war. And so how do you come back to your kid?
I mean, isn't that something that servicemen and women deal with?
Typically, they come back to a real world in which people don't agree with the war that they're fighting. And so they don't even come back to a grateful community.
We still haven't really answered the question. We really don't know what Victoria Newman's ends are besides being president.
She wants to keep her daughter safe.
Or is it just the thing she wants, too? And that's the best place to keep her safe, the executive branch. But you know what? She undermines her own goals when she says corporations should be in charge. Because even if she installs herself as president, the executive, well, who's really in charge? Still, the interests of the corporations. And we all know that Vought is a threat to be messed with. They control the soups. So we're back to square one where these corporations have too much power, 38% of the GDP. If you like what you've seen and heard from our dumb mouths this episode, well, why don't you head on over to ratethispodcast.com/squawkingdead, because 5 stars and the little water drop emojis is all we need to know that you love us. But tell us what you liked. Tell us what you didn't like. But remember to tell us, if you really like what you've heard, consider heading over to our Ko-fi and Patreon accounts and just following us there so that you could be a part of the chat and action shaping the course of these episodes like Francisco was. Instrumental. And if you really, really like the cut of our jib and want access to the unedited episode recordings, you can either tip us on ko-fi.com/squawkingdead, or you can join a membership tier for as little as $1 a month on Ko-fi or patreon.com/squawkingdead. That'll give you instant access to our Discord, the unedited episode recordings. And if you happen to join the Whisperers and Survivors here, you'll get 50% off in the merch store, access to our Jackbox games, which we haven't played in several months. Just to say that out loud. But you'll also be able to get a free classic t-shirt upon signing up. And if you happen to join the Survivors tier, the defining perk of that tier is that you get to join us on camera and mic, breaking these episodes down along with us. I've been your host, David Cameo, and I was joined by Birthday Girl, Cosmomom09, Rachel Burt, Sharon D, aka Blazing Gardner, and Bridget, ko-fi.com/Punky Brewster. That's PUNKYBRUISETER. And I just want to say, because it's the 4th of July, along with Rachel's birthday, is Happy Independence Day on this very dreary, cynical, political show. So,
hey, we have freedoms that were fought for, and I am thankful for that.
Me too, as a son of immigrants. And I think it's more be grateful for the red, white, and goo